Hi, my name is Ruby Sofia Lopez, and this is my story. This is a story of my own journey with mental health, and more specifically, how being a transgender woman has presented a unique set of challenges when navigating the behavioral health system. I was born in Chicago to a family of Mexican immigrants. I was the firstborn in my entire family. Just being like the firstborn on American soil just somehow felt like it just kind of like shaped the course of the rest of my life. And I think expectations kind of just started very early on for me, from my family, to be successful and to take advantage of all the opportunities that my family couldn't in Mexico. I grew up in that kind of context, a very Mexican, Catholic, very machista kind of family. I got into somebody's makeup and um, and played with it, right? And tried putting it on because that's what I saw my mom do, and that's something that I wanted to do. And I remember being scolded very severely for that, and something that was not appropriate for me to do. And so that's kind of the messaging that I got really early on. So for the rest of my childhood, I was, I was okay. I was a fairly normal person growing up. I was aware that I was kind of feminine, but that it was not okay to be that. In middle school, that's when I started to, I don't know, I guess kind of become a little bit angsty. And so that was like the first signs of like, that internally I felt like something was not quite right, but I just didn't have words for it. Then high school, I that's when I first started experimenting with gender nonconformity. It was under the guise of being like edgy, or I think like the word at the time was emo, right? But for me that was very liberating, because I got to wear eyeliner and wear my hair long, and I got to style it, and I was, however, very prohibited from wearing makeup in my house because the eyeliner was just a little bit too much for my parents. We had several conversations where, like, if I were to continue that, that would mean getting kicked out of my house. And so I just kept pushing things down and just acting the way that I thought society wanted me to act. I started to date, and I started having relationships, dating also. Relationships were difficult, and I didn't quite know why. I knew that I was attracted to people of the same sex as me. However, well, at the time, what that looked like a straight crush, right? But I didn't realize that there was something missing, there was something off, because I couldn't successfully relate to somebody as a boy or a man. That was the one piece that I didn't have at the time. But because of that, because I didn't have those pieces, I grew up thinking that there was just something deeply wrong with me. I got into the university of my choosing. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. That's the first time I came into contact with the mental health system. And I went to a therapist for the first time because finally all these feelings of just like vague, ambiguous, like something is not right, something doesn't feel right here and there. I think there just came a point where everything just kind of coalesce into like this kind of like a small black hole in my chest. That that dull ache would go on to grow and grow, and it got to the point where I suddenly, like someone that used to be a straight A student, found themselves not going to class anymore. And so I go back to the therapist and I tell them that, and their response is, "Oh well, here, take some more drugs." And so I was prescribed Adderall, and diagnosed with ADD. And so I'm just like, okay, cool. Well, I'm popped up on amphetamines now and antidepressants, so I thought that I could finish college all right then. I tried, but I didn't get too far. I think I was only able to get by for like another year or so before things got really bad. I stopped going to classes altogether. I dropped out of school. My social life was no more. What used to be once just like happy, social, going out and partying like college kids do, turned into just me by myself in a dark room with nothing but a handle of whiskey and a TV screen. I dropped out of school. Moved back in with my parents. I tried to move back to school because I didn't like being at home while being in such a miserable state of being. Like I knew that what I was dealing with not was not just like just depression on its own, isolated as something that just exists on its own. No, I knew that it was a symptom of something greater, and I knew that that thing that was greater had something to do with being queer, which was another layer because being queer was even worse than being mentally ill in my family. These were two things that I kind of had to grapple with, and the compounded shame of having both of those at the same time. All I wanted to do was just not be seen by anybody. I wanted to be left alone to die in peace. I remember um, uh, making an attempt on my own life. Having survived that, that's when I realized, like, okay, so I didn't die. That means I have to really do something about this. And that's when I really started to get serious about my mental health and getting better. And around that same time, there's this show called Orange is the New Black, which is on Netflix, that had just come out. I remember seeing Laverne Cox, this gorgeous black woman, black trans woman, grace my TV screen, and for the first time ever, I understood. I understood exactly what I was. I remember feeling like a moment of epiphany. Like I remember feeling like hot. I was like trembling a little bit. I don't know what I was feeling, but it was just like it felt like a spiritual experience just watching her on TV. At that moment, that's when I realized that I was transgender. I finally had a name for it. I told my parents, and they were not unsurprisingly not supportive, and so I found myself homeless in the streets of Chicago. I've always been pretty resourceful, and I was able to get help for myself, and I was in and out of mental institutions for a really long time. I'm saying it all as if it was one experience, but really I went back to like short-term inpatient. I want to say like 14 times, and I remember feeling like surprisingly safe for the first time in a very long time when I was there. And so my story is not like a scathing like story about all the wrongs in the mental health system. In this case, there were some things that were done right, and that was one of them. I remember feeling safe there, and I'm still grateful to that hospital and that program to this day. I met my first ever trans woman that wasn't myself there, and and I remember how lovely she was, and I remember feeling so validated, seeing someone like myself and living, a relatively normal life for somebody that's also in a psychiatric institution. Yeah, so that was that, but there were also other much more unpleasant experiences. Not only was I thrown in with general population, I was actually thrown in with the male population, and I remember feeling deeply scared, deeply disturbed, and just not at all in a place where I felt like I could recover. Eventually, I ended up leaving Chicago just because I didn't want to be in the same city as my parents, and so I moved to Washington D.C. And that's where I first started like really really transitioning full time for the first time in my life, and I remember through seeing some of their therapists and their doctors, I was like very easily able to be diagnosed as somebody that has gender dysphoria, and like yeah sure, I mean, I might have some like circumstantial depression, but that was no longer the defining thing that doctors were focusing on. Which to me felt like a relief because I've always thought that to be the case. I knew I wasn't actually like um, just inherently depressed because I was not that growing up. It's something that happened. And I always felt like it was for a reason. I just didn't know why. I never heard the term gender dysphoria up until I went to this center. I was also still drinking though. That was just a little habit that I still had not put down yet. And so instead of being in psychiatric institutions, I switched over to being in rehabs now. I had a partner that was very dear to me even to this day, that very kindly told me that I needed help, and that they would help me get that help. which was very different from any sort of treatment that I've gotten from anybody else in my life, specifically my family, surrounding my substance abuse issues. It made it feel like, yeah, like I will listen to you because I care about you, and it sounds like you care about me. So I accepted that. I put myself through rehab. I went to a Salvation Army rehab. I know the first time I came in off the streets, drunk out of my mind, and they were holding me in. I had a detox first, and so as a trans person, they didn't know where to put me. I refused to be put in the male population, and they wouldn't want to put me with the women. So what they did instead is they put me in a room by myself with nothing but like a thin mattress on the floor, and I mean it was essentially isolation. I was in isolation. I was in solitary. The way it felt in the experience, that'll just never go away. And I think that the way they treated me as something that was so different from any of the other patients there, and as somebody that honestly, I mean, I felt like they were treating me as somebody that was really, really just like not sane. When I was sane, I was just a transgender person trying to understand myself and trying to get rid of some unhealthy coping mechanisms, and I was being treated like somebody that was just not attached to this reality. Instead, I just said, okay, you know what? My parents have been like pressuring me for years to stop transitioning, stop what I'm doing, stop like all this quote unquote gay stuff, and it also seems like to get sober, I had to make a choice. So in the situation that I found myself deciding that at the time I thought the best thing was to detransition and to stop doing what my heart was telling me to do, because my mind was telling me, well, at least for now, just get help, stop drinking, and then maybe you can start again transitioning later. What I thought was a little bit of time ended up being several years. I remember feeling very uncomfortable. I remember being dressed in men's clothing that felt alien to me. I remember feeling like I was lying. I think it's unfortunate, really, that anyone in my position would have to go through that. Just for the name of trying to become healthier. The day I got out, first thing I did is I went and got a bottle and I drank. And then the day after that, I caught a plane back to Chicago, back to my parents, where I told them that I had just relapsed and that I needed for them to put me into a nicer rehab, because after all, I had stopped transitioning, like partially for myself, but also partially for them, and so part of that agreement was that they would help me get clean. And so they upheld their part and they put me into another treatment program. But I was in a treatment center almost the entire year, when all the pieces are put together. This one was a little bit better, but I remember at that point I was still kind of dressed as a guy and trying to just I don't know, convince people that's what I was, and partially convince myself. Maybe I was hoping. I think a part of me was still hoping that I was wrong, but of course that wasn't the case. So I got out of this last treatment center, and I'm happy to say that I've been sober from alcohol ever since then. That is almost 6 years ago now. After I got out, I still spent 2 years living as a guy, hoping against all odds that that whole trans phase would never come back again. Of course, that's not how things work, so it did. I very quickly after that did some self-searching and realized that, oh yeah, actually, in fact, I am transgender. I was right all along. The mistake was having stopped. But I don't regret any of it, because the pause did give me the certainty that I was lacking the first time of my transition. And during that time also, as a support system, I was going to AA meetings. Specifically in Chicago, they had this, and they have some here too, but in Chicago they have a whole clubhouse dedicated to gay 12-step programming. And so that was kind of like my lifeline for many years, and it really did get me through a lot. Yeah, ever since then, I've been here, still seeing a therapist. I'm very openly trans all the time. Like, there's no part-time stuff. I still sometimes find it difficult to find a very good queer friendly therapist. And that is what I think I would say my one biggest um, critique I have of the mental health system right now. And even now that I do have a job and I have insurance, I still find myself going towards some of the more affordable mental health options because if you start getting more specific, it tends to get more expensive and that can really add up. Unless you are a person of significant financial means, that is always a barrier. And just the fact that we just need more practitioners that are of diverse backgrounds, that are BIPOC, that are LGBTQ plus, that are of different faiths and different backgrounds. I would really I want to see more of that in the mental health care system, and I really just hope that by sharing my story is I'm shedding just maybe a little bit of a light on the health inequities that exist within the mental health system for transgender people, and how sometimes how inhumanely we could be treated, even not that long ago. Like 2015 was not that long ago. I was basically put into isolation by myself, just because the practitioners didn't know where to place me. So yeah, my hope is that folks really don't have to go through that anymore. And yeah, that's my story.